You wake up, no buzz, no plans, no notifications lighting up your screen, just stillness, just you. That quiet feels strange, almost too quiet. And then it hits, that whisper of doubt, that pressure in your chest, that ache, not for company, but for proof that you matter to someone. That's the moment most men bolt. They reach for their phones. They text someone they shouldn't. They scroll through distractions just to feel connected. Because society told you that silence means something's wrong. That if no woman's texting, if no friend's calling, then maybe you're behind. Maybe you're undesirable. Maybe you're failing. But what if the silence isn't a punishment? What if it's a door? A door most men are too afraid to walk through. See, the world taught you to fear solitude. But no one told you what happens when you lean into it. When you stop chasing noise and finally face the quiet. Because here's the truth. The man who embraces his solitude, who walks alone by choice, is not weak. He's dangerous. Because he's building something no one sees, something internal, unshakable. This message isn't for every man. It's for the ones who are tired of being picked last, tired of performing for approval, tired of shrinking to fit places they've outgrown. It's for the man who's done running and ready to rise. In a world of loud opinions and desperate attention-seeking, the man who chooses stillness becomes unforgettable. This isn't isolation, it's reclamation. You're not escaping the world, you're returning to yourself. Too many men drift from woman to woman, from job to job, from one shallow friendship to the next, chasing validation like oxygen. But when do you stop and ask, what happens if I stop chasing and just sit with myself? What happens is transformation. Your mind sharpens, your voice deepens, your standards rise. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing others to see your worth, that's when they finally notice. Before we dive in, I want you to write one thing in the comments. I choose solitude to forge my strength. Not because it sounds good, but because you're done hiding, because you're ready to stop chasing and start becoming. This is your line in the sand. Type it, own it, and let's begin. Number 1, the fear of silence. You sit in the dark, and for once, there's no escape. No alerts, no plans, no one asking for your time. Just the sound of your breath, and something heavier underneath it, your thoughts. Most men don't fear being alone. They fear what aloneness reveals. Not the absence of people, but the presence of truth. Silence isn't empty. It's confronting. It doesn't scream. It doesn't shame you. It just opens the vault. The regrets you buried, the choices you postponed, the versions of yourself you promised to become, but never did. Suddenly, they all show up. Uninvited, unfiltered. That girl who disappeared, that job you didn't apply for, that promise you broke to yourself when no one else was watching. You try to look away, but there's nothing to distract you anymore. No conversation to hide in. No relationship to drown in. No performance to act out. Just you, and the truth you've been avoiding for years. And now comes the real question. Will you finally face it, or run again? That's why most men stay moving, jumping from woman to woman, goal to goal, screen to screen. Not to build something, but to escape something. Not her, not them, themselves. Because silence strips the mask, and when it does, you either shatter or awaken. At first, the silence is brutal. It pulls your chest tight. It echoes every insecurity louder than any voice. You're not enough. You'll always be forgotten. Nothing you do really matters. But if you stay, if you breathe through the chaos, if you stop trying to run from it, something shifts. You begin to realize you're still here, still breathing, still capable. And those thoughts? They're not who you are. They're echoes, old scripts. They knock, but you don't have to open the door. That's when clarity comes, quietly, without fireworks, just a still knowing. You are not your past, not your regrets, not the woman who left, not the man who failed once. You are the man who stayed, the one who didn't flinch, who sat in his own fire and refused to look away. That's rare. That's power. That's stoic. Growth doesn't begin at the gym, not in books, not in podcasts or self-help reels. It begins in stillness. It begins the moment you decide you're worth facing. You sit in the storm. Let it scream. Let it twist. Let it tear through every illusion. And you stay. You don't fill the void. You let it exist. And in doing so, you reclaim what most men never touch: inner command. From that silence, a new voice rises. Not loud, but steady. Not perfect, but real. And when you move again, you move with weight. Your words hit deeper. Your presence feels centered, not because you've changed the world, but because you finally return to yourself. And here's the truth. The world doesn't need more men who blend in. It needs men who can sit in silence and walk out with clarity. Because that man, he doesn't chase. He doesn't prove. He doesn't beg to be seen. He becomes seen, because his energy doesn't ask, it declares. Number 2, approval detox. Most men are addicted to something they can't see. Not alcohol, not drugs, not gambling, but something far more subtle: approval. They check their phones first thing in the morning, not because they need information, but because they need validation. Did she reply? Did they like my post? Did someone notice me? It seems harmless, but it's not. It's neediness disguised as connection, dependency wearing a smile. And what makes it so dangerous is that it's invisible. No one warns you. There's no rehab for it, no intervention, but it eats away at you, slowly, because it doesn't just affect what you do, it rewires who you think you are. Approval seeking makes you shrink. You say yes when you want to scream no. You laugh at things you don't find funny. You avoid silence, avoid honesty, avoid standing alone. Just to avoid rejection. You think you're playing safe, But in truth, you're playing small. You're trading your voice for comfort, your identity for applause, your freedom for belonging. And over time, that need to be liked becomes a prison. You decorate the walls with compliments, but you know you're stuck, trapped in the image others built for you, not the man you were meant to become. Here's the truth. Approval is a high. It hits quick, then fades. And like all highs, it leaves you needing more. More attention, more validation, more performance. But eventually, you burn out. Not because you're weak, but because you've been wearing a mask for too long. And masks get heavy. But there's another path. It's not easy, but it's real. It begins with a detox, an approval detox. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop shaping your opinions to match the room. You start asking harder questions. Am I doing this because I believe in it, or because I want to be liked? That question alone shifts everything. You stop chasing quick yeses. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never listening in the first place. At first, it feels like withdrawal. You feel the silence, the distance, the voices in your head asking, what if they don't like me anymore? But you sit in it. You breathe through it. You let the discomfort sharpen you, and slowly, a new voice appears. Not loud, not dramatic, but solid. Your voice. The one buried under years of performance. The one that speaks, not to be heard, but because it must speak. And then comes the shift. You stop texting just to stay relevant. You stop laughing when it's not funny. You start honoring your time, your truth, your peace. People notice. They sense something different, a weight in your presence, a stillness in your eyes. You don't need attention. You carry attention. That's the paradox. When you stop trying to be seen, you become impossible to ignore. Because men who chase approval blend in, but men who choose themselves, they stand out. Not by volume, but by alignment. You know what you believe. You know what you'll allow. And most of all, you know who you are when no one's watching. That's the kind of man people remember. Not because he was loud, but because he was unshakable. Approval detox is messy. It costs you fake friends, surface-level smiles, temporary applause. But what you gain is everything. You gain respect, not demanded, but drawn. You gain peace, not from hiding, but from standing. And you gain power, not from control dash, but from clarity. So ask yourself, are you still living to be liked? Still adjusting who you are to make others comfortable? Or are you finally ready to choose yourself? Because once you do, really do, something shifts. You stop chasing. You stop explaining. You stop performing. You simply become. And the world watches. Number 3, clarity through solitude. There comes a moment in every man's life when the noise fades. And what's left is stillness, not forced, not empty, just quiet. And in that silence, something powerful happens. For the first time in a long time, the fog lifts. Not because the world changed, but because you stepped away from it. You turned down the volume on the expectations, the pressure, the constant opinions, and finally, you could hear what had been waiting underneath all along: yourself. Solitude is not isolation. It's restoration. It's the process of peeling back everything that isn't you, so you can finally see what is. In the chaos, you're reactive, you're rushed, you're adjusting, conforming, performing. You're constantly checking if you're doing it right by someone else's standard. But in solitude, you begin to slow down, to observe instead of react, to notice what you let into your mind, your time, your soul. You realize how much of your thinking never belonged to you. The goals weren't yours. The lifestyle wasn't yours. Even the idea of success was handed to you, and you've been chasing a version of life that never felt like home. But when you pull back, when the feed goes quiet, when the phone stays down, when the weekend isn't booked out, something new appears. Clarity. You begin to ask better questions. Not what do people expect of me, but what do I truly want? What energizes me? What depletes me? Who do I become around certain people? And do I like that man? Solitude lets you face those questions without noise, without pressure to answer quickly, without needing approval for your answers. You sit in it. You feel what's been buried. You breathe through what's uncomfortable. And slowly, the mirror clears. You stop pretending you're fine with things that don't feel right. You stop tolerating connections that feel hollow. You stop lying to yourself just to avoid discomfort. And you begin to live aligned. Not perfect, but real. Not polished, but honest. You start saying no without guilt. You create space not because you're distant, but because you're finally discerning. You begin to cut ties, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Solitude doesn't just clear your head, it sharpens your sight. You become intentional. You no longer wake up to survive the day. You wake up with direction. Your routines match your goals. Your circle reflects your values. Your environment becomes a mirror of who you are, not who you were trying to be. And something else shifts. You stop explaining your choices to people who will never understand them. You don't need to argue. You don't need to prove. You simply live. And your life speaks for itself. That's when you realize you're no longer available for drama. You're no longer vulnerable to manipulation. You're no longer influenced by surface-level noise. You're rooted, and that rootedness makes you immovable. People can disagree with you, misunderstand you, even walk away. And still, you remain centered. Because now, you're not living for them. You're living in alignment with the man you were meant to become. That's the real gift of solitude. It burns away distraction. It burns away noise. It burns away the versions of you that were never truly yours. And what's left is a man with peace in his chest and purpose in his stride. He doesn't speak to impress. He speaks because what he says matters. He doesn't chase. He builds. And he doesn't need to be understood, because he finally understands himself. So, If your world feels quiet right now, don't panic. That silence isn't emptiness. It's an invitation. It's your life asking you to slow down and listen. You don't need more attention. You don't need more likes, more replies, more women, or more noise. You need more stillness, more solitude, more moments where you sit alone and meet the man you've ignored for too long, yourself. The man who walks alone isn't broken. He's rebuilding. He's not running from the world. He's returning to his center, refining, sharpening, burning away everything that never belonged to him. He doesn't move like someone waiting to be chosen. He moves like someone who has already chosen himself. And when you become that man, life begins to align. The right people stay, the wrong ones fade. And opportunity doesn't have to be chased anymore. It simply finds you. That's not magic. That's mastery. If this silence resonates with something deep inside you, don't just scroll. Drop a comment below and answer this. What's one distraction you're ready to let go of today? Then hit like -- not because you were entertained, but because something in you awakened. And subscribe to this channel. If you're ready to build not noise, not popularity, but clarity, discipline, and quiet strength. Because here at the Stoic Spirit, we're not chasing approval. We're creating men who lead from the inside out. Men often come to me not for answers, but for relief from a pain they can't name. They sit with heavy hearts asking, what do I do when she stops caring, when she pulls away like I was never there? And every time I tell them the same truth. You're not broken. You're not powerless. You're just asking the wrong question. You don't fix silence by chasing it. You don't fix distance by collapsing into it. You shift the frame. Because you're not a victim. You're not here to beg for validation. You're a man, or at least you're meant to be walking toward that. And here's where everything changes. You don't teach her what she lost by arguing. You teach her by becoming someone she can't afford to overlook. A man who is grounded, purposeful, alive with quiet fire. That's not bitterness. That's not revenge. That's evolution. In today's world, attention is more than curiosity. It's currency. And when someone withholds it without reason, when you've offered truth, presence, and effort, it's not your job to convince them. It's your job to recognize the signal. And your response? Not anger, not sarcasm, not silent punishment, but structure, realignment. You anchor yourself back to what matters: your goals, your body, your mission, your code. You don't spiral. You don't sulk. You upgrade. That's the lesson she'll feel. Not from what you say, but from what she no longer has access to. If she can't see the value in a man who is forging himself in the discipline of purpose, that's her blind spot to carry, not your shame to fix. But she'll never feel that loss if you keep showing up for someone who never earned the right to receive you. This isn't about power games. It's about self-respect. Real relationships aren't built on control, but on mutual willingness. Two people choosing each other again and again. But when she pulls back without a word, when she slowly stops showing up, that choice becomes one-sided. And the silent withdrawal isn't harmless. It's the breaking of an unspoken contract. If you chase her while she's withdrawing, you confirm the imbalance. You reinforce her silence with your pursuit. But when you pause, when you step back with clarity and calm, you either shift the dynamic or you rise above it entirely. One of the most heartbreaking mistakes a man can make is allowing himself to become a side note in a story where he used to be the center. You must never be an option. You are not an afterthought. You are not someone to be remembered only when she's bored or lonely. You must be chosen. And to be truly chosen, you must first choose yourself. A man who disrespects himself will always attract people who mirror that same disregard. Self-respect isn't a statement. It's a posture. You live it long before anyone recognizes it. You walk it before anyone applauds it. Before you expect devotion or loyalty or consistency, ask yourself honestly, have I built a life that deserves it? You don't earn value by being constantly available. You earn value by being grounded in something greater than approval. When she ignores you, it's not a challenge to prove yourself. It's a reflection, a mirror showing you what part of your power you've given away. The moment her attention becomes your emotional oxygen, you've already left your throne. You've traded your authority for the illusion of closeness. But that throne, it was never hers to give back. It's yours to reclaim. Self-respect begins the instant you stop negotiating with people who don't value your presence. You don't teach her your worth by pleading for a reply. You teach her by becoming too aligned, too focused, too purposeful to need one. If your drive dies in her absence, you never had a drive powerful enough to begin with. You must become a man whose direction doesn't shift with the emotional weather of others. She is not your compass. She is not your source. Do not make her validation your belief system. You were not built to orbit someone's approval. Build a life so meaningful that even rejection becomes momentum. Let her absence echo in the silence. But don't let it rewrite your identity. You are not meant to be noticed by everyone. You are meant to be unforgettable to the right ones, because a woman cannot admire the man who needs her to breathe. She's not drawn to the man who clings. She's drawn to the one who stands, even when ignored, even when overlooked. He continues to rise, because true self-respect isn't loud. It's not about declaring your worth. It's about embodying it, silently, steadily. And here's the truth most men don't realize. A woman can't feel safe with a man who needs her approval to breathe. If your identity collapses the moment she looks away, she won't admire you. Not because she's cruel, but because you've given her power over something that was never hers to hold. You teach her how to treat you by how you treat yourself when she's not looking. Your standards, your posture, your peace, they all speak louder than your words. If you crumble every time she pulls back, she will test you again, not to hurt you, but to see what you're made of. It's instinct, and the masculine must remain grounded, especially when the emotional air gets stormy. What pulls her in isn't desperation. It's discipline, not control, but calm leadership. She doesn't crave a follower. She seeks a man who knows when to lead and when to leave. If your identity is tethered to her reaction, you disappear the moment her attention shifts. A man with no internal compass will always drift in someone else's tide. Respect cannot be earned by lowering yourself to keep her interest. Love rooted in need is not love. It's survival in disguise. You're not here to fill the empty spaces of her boredom. You're here to build something. Your time, your energy, your attention. These are not tools to win her back. They are sacred gifts and must be given with intention, not desperation. Stop trying to audition for a part in her story. Start writing your own. Every time you shrink to keep her close, you abandon the man you were becoming. Let her ignore the man who is evolving. Let her miss what she no longer understands. You are not less just because she can't see your light. You are only invisible to those who lack vision. If you want loyalty, you must first show loyalty to yourself. In your habits, in your purpose, in the way you show up for yourself every day. The tragedy is not her walking away. It's that you forgot who you were when she did. You were not created to be her emotional safety net. While she looks around for something shinier, she's not your enemy. She's just no longer aligned with your path. And you don't punish her. You refine yourself. Quietly, powerfully. Chasing her attention is not pursuit. It's the surrendering of your center. Strength is not in shouting your worth. It's in walking away without flinching when you're not being seen. The man who knows his value never has to convince anyone of it. He simply lives in such alignment that his absence becomes more noticeable than his presence ever was. Be the man whose absence lingers like a lesson, not the one who fades in the noise of need. Don't become forgettable in pursuit of being forgiven. Become undeniable through evolution. You don't gain power by demanding to be seen. You gain it when your presence becomes so purposeful, so rare, that your silence speaks louder than your words ever could. If she watches you bend your values, just to keep her attention, she will never believe in your leadership. Because leadership requires boundaries. It requires conviction. And a man without conviction is not inspiring. He's replaceable. When you elevate in silence, she has two choices: grow to meet you, or vanish in your rear view. Both are gifts. You don't chase attention. You command respect by no longer chasing what devalues you. The day you stop checking your phone, wondering if she noticed your absence, is the day you reclaim yourself. Self-respect isn't noise. It's the quiet rhythm of a man who no longer needs to prove he's worthy. Let her ignore the man who is quietly building something greater. Let her wonder where the chaos went and why peace now feels like distance. You don't owe her a reaction. You owe yourself consistency. You are not a storm begging for notice. You are the sky after the fire, clear, calm, and untouchable. Let her feel the space you no longer fill, not to hurt her, but to remind yourself that your presence was never meant to be used carelessly. Silence, when wielded with discipline, is more powerful than any speech. You don't teach her by trying to convince her. You teach her by becoming someone she no longer has access to. If your worth skyrockets the moment you leave, then it was never truly seen while you stayed. Distance is not rejection, it is refinement. The separation you choose is the mirror where your truest form appears. Don't fear solitude. It's the proving ground of real strength. The man who is whole alone cannot be manipulated by affection. Stop rehearsing lines for her approval. Start living by your own script. Stop chasing closure. Start creating clarity. You don't rise by replacing her. You rise by replacing the weaker version of you, who needed her to feel valid. You are not an extra in her story. You are the author of your own. You are not an option. You are a standard. And if she can't match it, you don't lower it. You enforce it. Women do not stay where there is no spine. They test you, not out of cruelty, but to see if you still stand when the winds of emotion blow hard. A man who holds his ground, without rage, without retreat, becomes unforgettable. Your calmness is power. Your restraint is power. Your absence is power. Because it is in the moments when you say nothing that everything becomes clear. You don't become magnetic by being available. You become magnetic by being aligned. You don't attract loyalty by needing it. You attract it by living in truth, unbothered, unwavering. So let her feel what it's like to lose access to a man who built peace from pain, who chose depth over drama, who did not beg to be kept. Let your absence become your instruction. Let your silence become her reflection. Let your evolution do the talking. Boundaries aren't walls to keep her out. They're the shape of your strength. They don't restrict intimacy. They define it. A woman can't feel safe in your presence if you don't know where you end and where her emotions begin. Without clear edges, you invite confusion. You invite chaos. You see, women don't test boundaries to destroy them. They test them to feel them, to know where the frame is, to see if you'll protect your core when she starts to spin. The feminine isn't wicked, it's wild, and that wildness isn't looking for a leash. It's looking for a center it can trust. When you lack boundaries, you become a mirror. You reflect her mood, not your mission, and in doing so, you lose her trust. She won't tell you directly, but she will begin to push harder to see if you'll finally push back. Not with aggression, but with presence, with clarity, with conviction. If she disrespects you and you stay silent, you're not being patient. You're being permissive. She doesn't read silence as strength when it hides fear. She reads it as surrender. And now you've taught her something, not with words, but with absence. You've taught her that your peace is negotiable, that your standards bend when she raises her voice. That's not strength. That's self-abandonment. You weren't meant to be her cushion. You were meant to be her ground. And ground doesn't move. just because the storm rages. You don't gain respect by being agreeable. You gain it by being unshakable, not rigid, rooted. The man she trusts isn't the one who nods through discomfort. It's the one who calmly says, "That's not acceptable," and then holds that line. Boundaries are the edge between love and manipulation, between care and control, between surrender and loss. They tell her, "This is where I stand, and if you step past this, you'll meet a version of me that's willing to walk away." Not because you don't care, but because you've cared too long to keep betraying yourself. You think she'll leave if you draw the line. But the truth is, she's already drifting when you don't. Because no woman can respect a man who erases himself to keep her emotions in check. She doesn't want to feel like she's overpowering you. She wants to feel your strength in a way that doesn't need force. That means you must stop explaining your worth and start embodying it. She doesn't want the man who adjusts himself to avoid conflict. She wants the one who stays true, even when challenged. She doesn't want constant agreement. She wants a boundary that doesn't tremble when tested. And here's the secret. She will test you, not because she's cruel, but because she's instinctive. She needs to know if what you say is who you are. When her emotion rises, do you rise with it, or do you become the anchor? If you collapse with her chaos, she learns she cannot trust your leadership. Because true leadership doesn't match the storm, it steadies it. You don't need to control her. You need to control yourself. You don't need to explain your boundary. You need to enforce it with calm, with consistency, with quiet certainty, because in a world where men yell or withdraw, a man who holds his ground without drama becomes magnetic. You are not here to fix her every mood. You're here to protect the structure. That allows love to grow. Without structure, love suffocates. It spills everywhere, and she drowns in her own fire. You were never meant to be her therapist. You were meant to be her frame, and frames don't move when the painting shifts. So what's the truth? If you want her respect, stop fearing her reaction. Start respecting your limits. When she crosses the line, don't argue, don't explain, stand. When she yells, don't yell back, don't run, remain. Your stability is her sanctuary, and the more consistently you defend your peace, the more she'll relax into it. Because deep down, she's not trying to find control. She's trying to find safety, and that only comes from a man who knows who he is and refuses to trade it for temporary approval. You don't lead by pleasing, you lead by defining. Boundaries aren't rejection, they're respect. They don't push her away, they show her the doorway to something real. A man without boundaries doesn't offer love. He offers access, and access without standards leads to erosion. The more available you are without discernment, the more invisible you become. You see, She doesn't fall for the man who bends at every turn. She falls for the man who knows when to stand still. Because chaos doesn't seek softness. It seeks stability. When she's spinning emotionally, she's not testing your love. She's testing your structure, not to break it, but to feel it. That's why she pushes. That's why she challenges, to see what you'll protect. When things get heated, if you fold, she loses trust. Not because she wants dominance, but because she needs to feel held by something stronger than emotion. She doesn't need you to fix her feelings. She needs to feel that yours aren't dictated by hers. This is where most men collapse, trying to solve every emotional wave, instead of standing like the shoreline that meets it. You don't lead by absorbing chaos. You lead by containing it, without losing your clarity. You are not her therapist. You are not her emotional sponge. You are the edge. That defines the shape of the relationship. She wants to feel your gravity, not your neediness. Because the more you chase peace, through pleasing, the more she feels alone in her storm. But the moment you stop chasing and start anchoring, everything changes. Boundaries are not obstacles to connection. They are the framework where trust can grow. They show her what you protect, and by extension, how much you value yourself. Because if you let her cross every line, she learns your soul has no gate. And that kind of man cannot lead a life worth respecting. She needs to feel that even in her most chaotic moments, you will not abandon yourself, that you will not shrink your truth to soothe her pain, that you will not betray your values to keep temporary peace. That's what makes her feel safe, not your compliance, your conviction. And here's what happens. When you hold the line, she stops testing. She starts trusting. She stops performing. She starts relaxing. Why? Because now she knows she's with a man who can weather her fire without flinching. She doesn't need a mirror. She needs a mountain. She doesn't need constant approval. She needs the comfort of your consistency. And consistency only comes from a man who's chosen order over comfort, direction over indulgence, truth over approval. The world is full of noise. She's looking for a signal. And your boundaries are that signal. They don't say, stay away. They say, respect lives here. They don't reject her. They reveal the version of you that cannot be manipulated by love. That's the man she follows. That's the man she admires. Not because he forces, but because he never folds. She won't tell you she respects your boundaries. She'll just show you by how deeply she trusts you, by how safe she feels, resting in your frame. Because when you stop trying to keep her and start keeping yourself, she finally feels she's with a man worth staying for. The price of having no boundaries isn't just stress. It's the slow erosion of your peace, the distortion of your purpose, and eventually, the loss of your place in her life. You were not born to absorb chaos. You were built to transform it, to redirect fire into focus and silence into strength. You don't teach her the value of your presence by explaining it. You teach it by withholding it from those who mishandle it. It's not through anger, not through begging. It's through calm disappearance, through a quiet elevation. She's no longer invited to witness. You must become the man whose worth is unshakable, whose time is not a free offering, whose soul isn't bargained for in the court of attention. There is no power in holding on to someone who lets go of your value. The power is in building a life so deeply anchored in meaning that her absence feels irrelevant. Set boundaries not to punish, but to preserve. Walk away not to prove a point, but to protect the man you're still becoming. You're not just teaching her a lesson, you're teaching yourself a law. That love without respect is poison, that stillness is strength, and that the man who chooses himself never begs again. Because the moment you stop chasing, you begin choosing. And the man who chooses himself is never ignored again. Not by her, not by the world, and most importantly, not by the man in the mirror.